Y'all, this week's lesson was inspired by me walking into an In-N-Out Mart and hearing the stalker, not stalker like somebody who follows you, but stalker like the guy who stocks the shelves. Um, overhearing what he was listening to on his phone. And I heard this song, which I love, and I'm like, that song would pair so well with Carl Sandburg's poem, Chicago. We should totally do that. So, this week, first of all, you're going to be looking at a poem by Carl Sandburg called Chicago. And then after you've done that, you are going to connect Carl Sandburg to Alicia Keys and Jay-Z. But I'll get to that later. All right? So, I'm brilliant. What can I say? I can't help it. I try not to be so brilliant, but this is just how it is. It's how God made me. All right. So you're going to look at the Ed Puzzle video, and you're going to answer the questions. I'm going to walk you through some stuff. I am going to try to break this down without making it too long. But this assignment that we're going over today is going to be, I'm giving you 2 days to do it because it's a big assignment. So my suggestion is you might want to watch this video today and do the Ed Puzzle, and then tomorrow go in and do the other things. So tomorrow you can go ahead and read the poem, do the common lit. All right? So you're gonna read the poem and complete the common lit assessment questions. Make sure you're logged into that, and then do the quick write and exit ticket on the slideshow before you submit. All right. So, Chicago by Carl Sandburg. First of all, I want you to open up this video, and I want you to watch these people reading the poem Chicago. There are several people, different snippets of different people reading the poem, so you'll hear it written in different ways. If this video doesn't work, click here and use the video link. And then respond to the quick write on the next page. It's right here. So here's the quick write. Quick write about Toledo. People love to bash on the city, but if you wrote an ode to Toledo, a poem that praised the good things about your city, what 3 things would you write about? Be specific and give reasons for your choices. So I want you to stop this Ed Puzzle video right now. And I want you to go to this quick write, okay? I want you to watch this video here and go to this quick write. And I want you to do this before we ever read the poem Chicago, okay? What 3 things do you think are really good about our city? And why would you choose those 3 things if you were to write a poem to praise Toledo? Go. Okay, so you stopped and you did that, right? Because this is all of the assignment, that I want you to do today other than the Ed Puzzle. Everything else you can do tomorrow. All right. So, about Carl Sandburg. So, hey, why do you think I always make you know something about the poet? Why do you suppose I do that? I'm probably going to make this an Ed Puzzle question. I want your thoughts on why you think I want you to know some background about the poet before you read. So Carl Sandburg, this dude here, he was born in 1878 and lived till 1967. He was born in Illinois. Chicago is in Illinois. Probably biggest city in Illinois, as far as I know. To a poor family. He fought in the Spanish-American War before going to college in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where he worked as a political organizer for the Social Democratic Party. In 1913, he moved to Chicago and became a writer for the Chicago Daily News and published several works of poetry. He won the Pulitzer Prize 3 times, twice for his poetry and once for his biography about Abraham Lincoln. He was a huge fan of Abraham Lincoln. So he didn't just write poetry, he also wrote journalism and he also wrote biographies, okay? And if you're unfamiliar with the Pulitzer Prize, you can click here and it will tell you all about how it is like one of the primary major awards for writing in the United States. So he was no slouch. He was a really good writer. So some fast facts, some interesting facts about him. He wrote mostly free verse poetry. Free verse being the kind of poetry where you don't have to have a certain number of beats per line, or you don't have to have a certain rhyme scheme. You're just free to make your lines as long as you want and make them rhyme or not rhyme at your will. Free verse. So he wrote mostly free verse poetry, and his poems were regarded as being really original for the times in which they were written. Remember that, before the turn of the 20th century, before around 1900-ish, if you were a poet, you'd better have rhyme and meter. You better be rhyming, and you better have a certain number of beats per line. Otherwise, people are like, that's not poetry. So he was one of the people who really helped break that mold. This is really important to Chicago. This is really important to the poem we're reading, okay? This bullet point here. The themes of his poems frequently focus on the industrialization of Midwest America, the Midwest being like this area where we live, Ohio, Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, Michigan. And they also focus on the American worker, like a lot of the working man at the time. I say man, women worked too, okay? Or a lot of women who worked, actually. We just don't hear about it as often. But he really, really focused on industrialization, which is this, when machinery really started taking over human jobs. Okay, you've probably talked about the Industrial Revolution in social studies class. Same thing. So the idea that we have all of these big factories being built and all of these people who are hired to run these machines in these factories, that's part of industrialization. So he really focused on that a lot, and he also focused on how that affected the people who were workers. A lot of these people were what we call working class poor. They worked, but they didn't really make great wages because, early 1900s, that was a time before we saw a really big unionization movement where workers were binding together and creating unions so that they wouldn't be taken advantage of by their employers, and they could get fair wages, and they could get, they had to fight for a weekend. It used to be that there was no rule for how often or long your employer could work you. They could work you all day, every day, and say, hey, if you don't stay 14 hours today doing this dangerous job in these filthy conditions while you're starving to death, then we're going to fire you. Okay, so he, when I say too up here, he was a member of the Social Democratic Party, you might want to look that up. It's kind of interesting, and it really does relate to Chicago and the idea of the American worker. So he's known as the people's poet because he spoke for the working class, and he spoke for the poor. He spoke for the average human being, not the rich. So if you click here too, you can watch this little video, just quick video, that kind of explains how his politics and his writing were very, very intertwined. And really, you're going to find that with a lot of literature. Politics and literature are very intertwined. Okay? All right. So let's see. He never graduated from high school or college, either of them. And his first language was Swedish. Here, I'll get rid of my face here for a minute. His parents were immigrants. They were from Sweden, and they couldn't even write well enough to sign their own names. And here's their son, who's like this brilliant genius in the English language. It's pretty outstanding to see the things that he achieved with a minimal education and coming from poverty and coming from people who couldn't even speak English very well. All right, so Carl Sandburg, that's what you need to know about him. Literary devices. We've talked about theme over and over and over again. Okay, but I'm bringing it up again so that you know I need you to pay attention to the theme as you read this poem. So it's the underlying message or main idea of a work of literature. Okay? Personification. Remember that this is a figure of speech where an idea or thing is given human characteristics or is spoken of as if it were human. So if I were to write a poem about this phone and I were to talk about the phone as if it were a living, breathing human, I would be personifying it. If I say the phone ate my battery, okay? Phones don't literally eat. So whenever we say that the phone ate the battery, we are actually using personification. Okay? If you want some super duper big clues to understanding this poem, I'm not going to go over it in this video, but if you click here on this link, oh, it just took you to kind of a cheat sheet. But I'm not going to go over it with you. I'm going to make you do that legwork yourself. Remember that a speaker is the voice of the poem. You guys, y'all keep confusing the poet with the speaker still, okay? The poet is the person who wrote the poem, but the speaker is the voice that is telling us the story in the poem. So when the speaker in this poem is talking about you, because he'll keep saying you, he's actually referring to the city of Chicago, okay? Chicago is the you in this poem. So the speaker is the voice who is narrating the poem. And in the context of this particular poem, when the speaker speaks of you, he's not speaking of you, the reader, sitting here reading it. He's speaking of the city of Chicago, who he's personifying. So also keep a lookout for similes and metaphors, as always. All right, so your activity. Read Chicago by Carl Sandburg on Common Lit. Make sure that you are logged into Common Lit. Sign in with Google. We've been over that before. At this point in time, if you are one of those people who's only looking at the slides for this assignment and you're not doing this Edpuzzle lesson, you know, I'm hoping that this big old message here got those people to come here. And all caps. It's in all caps, which means I'm yelling at you, right? I'm like, go to the Edpuzzle, because I really want to talk through some Common Lit stuff with you today. Some you've only used it a couple of times, some of you, and I want to make sure that you understand what you need to be doing. So I'm going to click here on the link for Chicago. I notice up here in the corner that I am not logged in. It says log in, so I'm going to make sure I click log in, and I'm going to log in with Google, which is what you should be doing. I'm going to use my Horizon Toledo account to make sure that this gets recorded and I can do the things, all right? Mine is coming from a teacher's angle, so yours might look a little different. You should have some blurry stuff here because I put this in guided reading mode. So when you look here at your poem, it says Carl Sandburg was a Swedish-American poet, writer, and editor, yada, yada. As you read, take notes on how the speaker uses figurative language to describe the city. You can actually take notes here if you want through using this highlight guy. You can highlight and annotate. So let's say that you see something here where you're like, hey, fierce as a dog. Huh, I noticed figurative language. So I'm going to click here to highlight it. And, oops, I want to highlight the whole thing. Okay, I'm going to highlight it. And I also want to write something about it. So I'm going to write that this is simile, because he's comparing the city to a savage dog. Yeah. I'm not a very good typer. Okay, so if I do that, then, and I'm keeping in mind personification and figurative language as I read, and I write these things down, then it might help me later when I have to answer the essay question at the end. Okay, so this is one feature. Another feature I want to point out again is this read aloud. If you click here.
Chicago, by Carl Sandburg, 1914. Carl Sandburg, 1878 to 9.
It will read the poem to you, or it will read certain lines to you.
They tell me you are wicked and I believe them, for I have seen your painted women under the gas lamps luring the farm boys, and they tell me you are crooked and I answer.
Okay? So if you need to, please use that. So you're going to read through, and every time you come to one of these Q questions, everything for you right now should be blurred below Q1, okay? So this, you have to click this guiding question, and the reason that I put the guided questions here is because you have to answer them correctly before you can keep going. And these guided questions help make sure you understand what's going on before you keep reading. So let's just look at the first stanza here. Stanza being a group of lines in a poem. Hog butcher for the world, toolmaker, stacker of wheat, player with railroads and the nation's freight handler, stormy, husky, brawling, city of the big shoulders. Question here is, the city is described as, is it strong, poor, rich, or weak? Well, it's being connected to ideas about hog butchers, railroaders, people who can stack giant things of wheat. It is described as being husky and brawling. Husky meaning, built big and sturdy. Brawling meaning fighter. City of big shoulders. Okay, if we imagine, this is personification because the city doesn't have shoulders, by the way. If we imagine that the city has big shoulders, it means that a lot can rest on there, okay? So the best answer here is going to be strong. So I'm going to click A, and it's going to say, great work, you're right. Or if I click the wrong thing, it's going to say, nope, and it's going to make me keep clicking until I get it right. And I can see how many times you had to make an attempt before you got this right. So please don't just guess through these, because then I'll be able to see that you just kept screwing it up, and I'll know you didn't really read. Okay? All right, so I'm even going to highlight here. I'm going to be like, why is it doing this to me? Personification. I'm going to highlight that and note it so that I can remember it later. So as you go through, it's going to make you do that, okay? And then the assessment questions. There are 5 questions here. 4 of them are multiple choice. Please read carefully. This first one is going to ask you about the theme. Which of the following do you think best describes the theme? So before you answer these questions, read through this poem once. And if you still don't understand what you read, then I want you to go through and I want you to read it again. Look at all the footnotes, see what they say. If after a second time you're still a little iffy, I want you to read it a third time. I want you to annotate. And then, and only after you've read it several times, do I want you to answer these questions. Okay? So which one do you think is the main theme? Which detail from the text best supports the answer to part A? Okay, so this is asking you, which one of these is the theme? Okay, so whichever one you chose, you have to choose a quote from the poem that best supports that theme. You have to cite evidence. 3 asks you, how do the people who are referred to as they in the poem provoke the speaker to further discuss Chicago in lines 6 through 8? So that's right here in line 5. They tell me you are wicked, and I believe them. For I have seen your painted women under the gas lamps, luring the farm boys. And they tell me you are crooked, and I answer, yes, it is true. I have seen the gunman kill and go free to kill again. And they tell me you are brutal, and my reply is, so who are they in these lines? And finally, how are the details described in lines 13 through 17 important to the poem's meaning? So that means that you have to go here to lines 10, 11, 12. This is 13. 13 through 17. Right here. Fierce as a dog with tongue, lapping for action. Cunning as a savage pitted against the wilderness. Bareheaded, shoveling, wrecking, planning, building, breaking, and rebuilding. How do they emphasize? The last question, how does the poet use personification to describe Chicago? So knowing that you have to talk about personification, you are going to make sure that you are annotating for personification as you read this poem. Because, here's where I go back here. It says, answer the assessment questions. Whoa. It says, answer the assessment questions when you are finished. When you get to the last question, which is a writing prompt, make sure to use races. Make sure to use races. You restate, you answer the question. You cite several pieces of evidence from the poem that you've already annotated and highlighted, so you just go back and find them. You explain how each piece of evidence supports It personifies. Okay, and then you end with S. So what? Why is this important? How can we make connections to this in the real world? Okay? So if you are not using races, if you are not writing several sentences in these answers, that's why you're getting ones. Because some of you are just writing one sentence and then stopping. You're like, I'm done. No, you need to use races, restate, answer, cite evidence, elaborate on the evidence. So what? All right. See, I made myself big because this was really important to me. All right. So you've done all those things. Once you've done all those things, you take a look at the last slide. This is the very last thing you're going to do for this assignment. After you have done everything else, answer the following question. Consider how the speaker personifies Chicago in order to describe the city. What 3 human characteristics would you give to your hometown, school, or neighborhood? Discuss why you would choose these characteristics. All right. So, in what 3 ways would you personify our city and why? You have to explain why to get full credit. Why would you choose those 3 things? I cannot wait, actually, to see what you say. It's pretty exciting to me, actually. All right. So you have today and tomorrow to finish this assignment, assuming that you're viewing this video on Wednesday. 2 days to do this. So again, if you just watched the Ed puzzle today and did the quick write, that's all you need to do today. You can go in and do the rest tomorrow. Or you can do it all today and get it knocked out. Give yourself a free day tomorrow. All right? Whatever you do, though, make sure that if you have questions, you contact me. Text, email, call. All right? Have a lovely rest of your day.